And we're live. Hello. All right. Got a couple things to set up here, and I'm going to wait for people to pour into the stream. Get that down there so you guys don't see my picture-in-picture. Hey. That's right, emails. Wonderful, wonderful emails. That'll be our first topic after we're done with the syllabus. All right. Let's see, we've got 4 people watching, so I'm going to give it another minute, let everybody roll in. Although YouTube does take a while to update, so for all I know, everybody's in here. Let me see how many people are in this class. I think there's about 14 of you. Somewhere in that ballpark. 15. It just keeps multiplying. Okay, hey. 12, that's good enough. Those 3 didn't want to be here anyway. All right, welcome to 475 Technical Writing. Technical Writing, this is going to be the syllabus day, where I'm going to mostly read the syllabus. But because this class is an hour and 15 minutes long, we are going to get to some stuff today. And if you are in the senior design class, which I think is everybody, I'm basically just going to gloss over the syllabus in that one because this kind of goes for both of those classes. I'll just point out the differences when we get there, I guess. But for the most part, this is going to go for both classes. Everybody hear me all right? Any problems with the audio or anything today? I don't hear any issues, so I'm going to move on. But I am going to double check. Let's see if I sound all right. Okay. All right, so I think everybody here has probably, let's just play it in picture so I can see that alongside. I think everybody here has probably had me before, but if not, I'm Dr. Gurari. It's pronounced like Ferrari, but with a G, so Gurari. Before we begin, I want to make a little bit of a disclaimer. I come from the old internet, the hateful internet, the one where nobody says nice things. So this will be my longest stretch of being nice on the internet in my life, 16 weeks for this course. If I make some off-color jokes or get a little spicy, that's on me. I don't mean to offend anybody. I want everybody to have a good time. I don't want anybody to feel bad. Just jokes. Sorry, people. And I do curse like a sailor, and I apologize for that. That's probably just going to continue. And the other disclaimer is that this is an online class, but it is a real class, so it is possible to fail. I don't want anybody to fail. I don't think anybody will fail. If you put in a reasonable amount of effort, you'll probably do fine. But I don't want the impression that just because it's an online class, it's going to be super easy and we're not going to do anything. So, yeah, I see in the chat, cancel Gurari already. So, yeah, don't do that, please. Yeah, when I make a bad joke, don't cancel me. Anyway, if this is an online class, there will be a normal amount of work. I'm not going to give you more work just because you're online. I think the lectures are going to be delivered in a pretty normal way, even if the format is a little bit strange. So there will be the amount of work that you're used to in your other classes. Hopefully you're going to learn things just like you would anywhere else. And again, it is possible to fail, so give it the same amount of consideration you would give if this was a physical class. If you're here, you know how this is being delivered. It's going to be delivered via YouTube Live, so please subscribe to the channel so you get notifications. I'm going to announce the first few in Canvas, and then after that I'm just going to stop announcing them. I I will post the streams to Discord, though, when they start, because that doesn't cost me any effort. Now, class chat will happen over Discord. I'll talk a little bit more about Discord later. Obviously, a lot of you are already on YouTube chat. You can definitely comment on YouTube chat if you want. The only downside to YouTube chat is that it is public, so other people from the internet can see your chat, and it does save that chat record along with the video, so they'll be able to see it in the future. Probably not going to be an issue, but if there's something that you don't want to say publicly, just put it on Discord instead, or if you just want to put something on Discord instead, go that way. The other problem with YouTube chat is that those comments are only attached to the video. They're not attached to kind of the class record. So if somebody wants to go back and see all the comments that have been posted sort of in the class so far, they would have to pull up that video and look at it, which can be inconvenient. So if you have like a substantive question, something that's actually important and not just meme spam, you should probably put that on Discord so that we can all see that and also have a reference to it later. Now, this class is a writing class, so there are going to be peer review sessions where you guys are going to talk to each other about your writing, and there's also going to be group work where you write something collaboratively, and other meetings. Those are all going to happen over Discord. So whenever I'm talking to you guys, I will talk to you over Discord, and when you're talking to each other as well. To contact me, my email right there, that's probably the best way to contact me. I'll typically answer you in the same day. I check my email multiple times a day. I don't check Discord very often. If you send me something, code, writing, whatever, I'll try to respond to you with code or writing, so that's convenient. And yeah, email me. Email me if you have any issues. I do keep odd hours right now, so if I don't email you back, it might be because I'm asleep. And if I email you back in the middle of the night, sorry, just respond to it in the morning. It's okay if we miss each other by a few hours. So I'm putting office in quotes here for office hours because obviously I'm not going to be in my office this semester, and we are going to be doing office hours over Discord. So the way it's going to work is you are going to join the office hours text chat on Discord. So you'll see for this class there's a office-hours text chat at the top. And just leave any message in there. I'm going to show you an example here. I'm going to go into that channel. I'm just going to leave some message, so something like that will suffice. Just put down here. And when you've left that message, I'm going to DM you at some point, and I'll just DM you in the order that I see the messages. And the reason we're doing it this way, and not just you joining the office hours waiting channel, is because I have multiple classes, so I have multiple Discords. So there would be multiple office hours waiting channels, or I'd have to make a Discord specifically for office hours, which is too confusing. So just put your message in that text chat, and I will get to you. It's also possible that there are other people who I'm DMing with in other classes. So if I haven't gotten to you and you're like, the channel's empty, but he's not DMing me, it's because there's somebody in another class that I'm probably working with. If you DM me, that doesn't put you in the queue, so just make sure you post something in the office hours chat for me to get around to you. If there are any questions about that, post those to either chat. Okay, if you need additional help beyond anything I can offer you, the Writing Center is open online this semester, so check those guys out. They have consultants available over Zoom, or they can look at your writing and leave you comments in Google's Doc. They are obviously free to you students, and they are sometimes available on a day's notice, but give them at least a day usually to review your stuff. So try to contact them at least a few days before the assignment's due. Where'd it go? All right. So Discord, Discord's going to be your main communication platform for talking to one another, and you should be on Discord during class time because we're going to shift to doing stuff on Discord occasionally. You can install it on your phone, but I recommend that you have it on your PC, and I recommend that you have a good pair of headphones so that there's not an echo and everything. I'm going to have Discord open during class. Obviously, I don't have my Discord audio running, so there's no way to talk to me through Discord while class is active, but you can still post messages. You can ask each other things like, when is the homework due in real time? There are no exams in this class, by the way, so that's just there as an example. You can always DM me on Discord if you want to ask questions anonymously. Obviously, I know who you are, so it's only semi-anonymous. And at some point, I will ask all of you for your Discord names so that I can know who's who for this class. And you can network, discuss with your peers, post dank memes, I don't mind. I don't moderate the Discord, so I take no responsibility for any of the horrible things that you people post there, but try to be nice to each other. General rules, don't spam Discord chat. I hate spammers. Use push to talk if you have background noise, if you live in a house with 9 dogs or 10 kids or something and you're all in one bedroom. Just mute your mic when you're not talking. Feel free to join different Discord channels while the YouTube Live is running and have side conversations. I don't mind that. So if you want to talk about the lecture or whatever, just join a Discord channel and you can have a chat. If you need to join late or leave early or step out of the Discord, obviously, then just do it. Do it silently. You can email me and I'll let you know what you missed, or you can just watch the video because these videos are going to stay up after the live stream is over. So that's probably the better approach. And if you miss an exam, that's relevant because there are no exams in this class. If your phone goes off, silence the ringer, please. Okay. One more thing before we get back to the PowerPoint. If you haven't already, check the quality slider on your YouTube stream. So click that little gear in the bottom right corner and make sure you're watching in 1440p. That's 2K, so it might be a lot easier to read the text and everything. Put in all this effort to stream in 2K, you might as well use it, right? It usually defaults to 720 or 1080p. So again, go to that gear in the bottom right and bump the quality to 1440p, which is 2K. All right, back to the slideshow. Let's scroll down in the actual syllabus here. So this is a writing class. You should expect to write at least something every day, at least every class day, and probably every working day of the week. You should expect to write at least a little bit. We're going to address a bunch of common scenarios where a professional software engineer, so something I think all of you aspire to be, would need to write professionally. That got cut off there for some reason. Those include things like emails, resumes, cover letters. Those are going to be probably the first things you're going to be writing in your career. And then we're going to go into things like code documentation, tutorials for others. Some software engineers never write tutorials, and that's quite irritating. So trying to make sure that you guys are good software engineers. Handoffs are very important. So handoff being, of course, when you pass a project on to another team. That's a handoff. And then we'll go into some more interesting ones: white papers, presentations to management, presentations to other professionals, talking to customers, those sorts of things. So I think in the past this course was more of like a blog course and that sort of thing. I've kind of pivoted it more to things that you would actually run into in the workplace. Listening to me talking about writing, though, it's obviously not very productive. So most of the class is not going to be a lecture. I'm only going to lecture briefly at the beginning or the end. And then the rest of the class will be writing or reviewing writing. Don't expect to be listening to me for most of the time. And when you're writing, you'll be in Discord, and I'll be popping in to see how you're doing. Learning outcomes, you are going to learn how to write competently in a variety of different scenarios, common to the computer science professions. You can read the program goals at your leisure. You're going to need Discord for this class and nothing else, except for obviously some kind of software to write with. So if you don't have Microsoft Word or whatever the Apple equivalent is, you probably should get it, or I recommend LibreOffice. That's what I use. You can use Google Sheets or Google Docs as well, too. It doesn't really matter. I have 2 textbooks for this class. You don't need either of them. We're never going to refer to them or anything, but they're both kind of classics in their field. So The Elements of Style is a very short book. It's also quite cheap. I think you can probably even find it online because it's so old it might even be public domain. That book is a general intro to writing well. There's a lot of good information on there. I think a lot of the points that are there still hold true. A lot of people disagree with points here or there, but I think overall it's a very respected book in writing. Someone asked, is there going to be coding for this class? Yes, there will be some coding, but the coding will be secondary to the documentation in this class. So when you have to code, it'll be I guess I should say easy code. It's not going to be anything particularly interesting. You're not going to be learning anything you shouldn't already know. And the thing that we're going to focus on is, did you explain it well? Did you document it well? So there will be a part where you have to write some code and document it. I might not even look at the code. I might only look at the documentation. I might not even care if your code doesn't work. I'm really going to focus on your documentation, which is where clean code comes in to an extent. So this is a somewhat controversial book in the field of writing agile software. One of the main points of clean code is that you should not write comments, or that you should write comments as little as possible, because your code should be self-documenting. And it has a lot of these kinds of interesting points in there, interesting ideas. So check that one out as well if you'd like. I think it's a pretty decent book overall. There's a lot that I disagree with, but it's, again, very well respected in this field, and I think it's worth a read, at least. Worth a reference too. It's a good book to have on your shelf. Homework. So expect at least a weekly writing assignment. So there might be multiple writing assignments in 1 week. Some of them will be shorter than others. So you might have a writing assignment that's due on Thursday, assigned on Tuesday, something like that. Check Canvas for the due dates. So the due date will always be whatever it says on Canvas. I can grant you an extension, no questions asked, as long as you ask me before the deadline. So if you can't finish the assignment for any reason, message me and I'll give you an extension. However, a few days after the assignment is due, occasionally we will have a peer review of that assignment. And if it already goes out for peer review, then I can't give you additional time, because at that point, whoever was supposed to be peer reviewing yours is supposed to have it. Now you've kind of cut into their time, so at that point you just get a 0. So make sure that you get everything in before it goes out for peer review. I think those dates will also be in Canvas, because we're going to go through Canvas for the peer review. So if you see that something is up for peer review, then make sure that it's done before it goes out. And if you are late without asking me for an extension up front, then the penalty is going to be 10% per calendar day. So the first time you're late, that's 10%, and then midnight the next day is another 10%, midnight the next day is another 10%, and so forth. Your grade is going to depend mostly on whether you communicated what you were supposed to communicate. So you're trying to become effective communicators here. You're trying to say things in a way that communicates it well. Write things in a way that communicates it well. Not much presentation in this class. Some assignments will have a code component. In that case, they'll borrow from this portion, because part of the communication is the code in that case. And then the rest of your grade, 20%, is going to be tone, pace, and brevity. I think a lot of the public education system focuses on making you write a particular length. They want you to write, say, like a 2-page paper. They want it to be exactly 2 pages. And if you come in under 2 pages, you get penalized. In the real world, this is very unfortunate, because in the real world, nobody wants to read a 2-page paper that was written for the sake of being a 2-page paper. Being as short as you possibly can while still communicating effectively is ideal. So you should write as little as you can while still getting the point across. So I will actually give you more credit for summarizing something quickly. There will usually be page maximums. So I'll say that something you have to turn in has to be 4 pages max. If you can finish it in 1 page, that's good, not bad. So don't say, okay, this is a 4-page assignment, and my entire education up to this point has told me that I need to submit exactly 4 pages or I'm going to lose credit. No, actually the opposite. The least amount of writing that still gets the point across would be ideal. Now remember, you do still have to get the point across, so don't be brief at the expense of being clear. Briefness comes secondary. Brevity comes secondary to clearness. And then I'm also going to look at your tone and your pacing. Are you rambly? Does the tone match the audience? Is it as formal or informal as it should be? Those sorts of things. The last 10% of your grade is going to come down to grammar and technicals. I'm a big grammar Nazi. I want you to spell words correctly, but I'm not as big on spelling as I am on proper grammar. So if you're missing all your commas and you're using the wrong your in there, that's going to definitely count against you quite a bit. Peer reviews are going to be due typically the week after you get them, so you'll have to review somebody's assignment. You'll have about a week to do it. And I'm also going to grade your peer review just to make sure that you're giving them useful feedback. So if you're giving them useful feedback and I can generally read what you've written in the peer review, it doesn't have to be formatted amazingly, but it has to be legible. If I can do both of those things, then you're good. Typically, the peer review is going to be worth some 15% of that assignment's total score. It could be less, but no more than 15%. So if an assignment's worth 100 points, the peer review of that assignment might be worth 15. It'll depend on how long the assignment is. So if it's a peer review of a paragraph, I'm not going to give you very much for it. No tests in this class, just writing assignments. Hooray. There will not be a final in this class either, but there will be a somewhat longer paper towards the end of the course. That's going to serve as your final project. Scroll down over here. Okay, we are going to have some assigned readings, and just to make sure that you pay attention, I'll occasionally give you a quiz on the assigned readings. Those are going to operate through Canvas, your open notes book, and internet, which means obviously that you can just open the thing that you were supposed to read, right? So I'm going to make the quizzes very time constrained. You might get like 5 or 10 minutes to complete them. And I want you to either read the readings beforehand and understand them, or if you choose to never read the readings and just pick up speed reading as a skill, I'll be happy with that too. If you can parse an entire article and answer my questions in 5 minutes, that's awesome too. Or you can just read it in advance and then be able to answer my questions by virtue of actually knowing the answers. So whichever approach you want to take, by all means. There will be one-on-one meetings with me after certain assignments are due. So after some of the longer assignments, I'm going to meet with you one-on-one during class. Those will be for 5, 15 minutes, depending on how much we have to talk about. Kind of early on in the semester here, I'm going to post to Canvas the meeting order. It'll just be assigned randomly. So you'll just be numbered from 1 to 15. I'll pull in 1 for a DM first, and then I'll go to 2, and then I'll go to 3. So you just sit on Discord and wait your turn or write something else, work on your reviews. You'll have something else to do during that time. You're not just going to be expected to sit there. If you miss your slot, so let's say you're 3, you miss it, I'm going to go on a 4. I'll check back with you a couple times, so I'll keep trying 3. The only way you'll be penalized for it is if you miss your slot entirely, so I get through everybody and you're still not there. If you're the last person, I'll give you a little bit of a grace period, but just try to make sure you're watching your DMs for when I give you a call. If you just miss your slot, it's not a big deal, though. I'll get back to you. There's no penalty for missing these lectures. You can always watch the recording. So there's technically no grade for attendance. You just have to be present for your one-on-ones, the peer reviews, the group work. In-class writing assignments will become homework if we don't finish them, if you don't finish them. And some assignments might require a group, so if you miss class that day, just find somebody to work with on your own. Some assignments have like an element where you have to write back and forth to each other, so you'll just have to find a partner somehow, and you can do that through Discord, hopefully, if somebody else missed class as well. Final grading is going to be plurality homework, so 40% is going to be homework. 30% is going to be in-class writing assignments. There's going to be a lot of overlap between these two because like you'll turn to homework, then the peer review will be in class, or you'll have an in-class writing assignment that you don't finish. That becomes homework, but it still counts as an in-class writing assignment, so a lot of overlap there. 10% quizzes, 20% will be a longer form project or projects, and you can check the syllabus for the grade threshold. It's the usual 93 and up is an A, 90 to 93 is an A minus, etc. You voted for generous grading on Canvas. I had a survey up there, and almost everybody voted for generous grading, or I think it won with the big majority. So generally, when I teach a class, I assign easier or harder work until the median of the class reaches around an 85. So that is the student that's right in the middle of the grade book should have around an 85, and no lower than a 75, because then less than half the class would have a C or better, or somewhere thereabouts. But anyway, I try not to let it go lower than 75. So this time I'm going to assign work that is designed to get the median person up to somewhere in the high 80s. That means about half the class would have an A at that point. And then most of the people who are below that threshold, instead of having a B minus or a C, would have a B. The people who would have normally earned a C or lower will still probably earn a C or lower, so don't think that you can just slack off just because it's more generous. It's more generous towards the average performer, not towards the lowest end. It's about the same on the low end if you look at the picture. Thank you for whoever posted the PDF of the textbook there on Discord. The other one should be available too, but piracy is wrong and nobody should click that. Just disregard that completely. So looking at the syllabus calendar, you'll see some major topic dates. Those topics might move around. Any of the important events, the holidays, that sort of thing, those are going to stay where they are. So pay attention to those. We've got Mass of the Holy Spirits and the weird class on Tuesday thing during Thanksgiving break, all that fun stuff. Okay, according to Discord, somebody purchased the right of the book and he can distribute it as he pleases. So just direct all of your money to him now then, I guess. Are you accepting donations for that textbook now? All right, the cheating policy, you should know at this point that you should write your own work. I think if you haven't figured it out by your third year of college, I don't know how you got to this point, but I have no tolerance for you copying, writing from books, articles, the internet, your peers, etc. Make sure that everything you write is written from scratch in your own words. Copying something and then changing or moving around a few words is still plagiarism. You could fail on the first offense depending on severity. If you just copy like a paragraph directly from one of your peers, you're just going to fail on the first offense. That's intolerably stupid at this point. Okay, so make sure that you write your own words. Your own words. Let me make sure my audio is still good here because headphones turning off sometimes affects the old boom mic. Okay. If you're checking your audio, it's best not to sit in silence. How's the audio? Am I still in? You know, I don't know why I'm looking over there. I got tools for this. I have technology. All right, my audio's good. Moving on. Okay, and don't contract anybody to write your papers for you. You can obviously ask people to look at them for you, but make sure that everything you write is yours. It's usually pretty obvious when somebody does that. Yeah, all right. You can read the disability, discrimination, bias statements, all that boilerplate stuff on your own time. Spoiler, it's exactly the same as everybody else's. So big picture, be respectful, get Discord, make friends on Discord. Hopefully all of you already know each other, since you're quite far along. Ask questions, be diligent, don't fall behind, do your homework. Email me if you're stuck, if you have an issue, and don't cheat. And that's about it. Any questions on the syllabus before we get into some good stuff, before we get into some email? Let's say it's that one. Looks correct. Someone asked on YouTube, who are these people? I don't know. If you haven't gotten a chance to be acquainted with these folks in the 3 years you've been at university with them, then I guess you missed your chance. All right, so how much time do we have here? What are we looking at? Forgot how long this class is. This is 475. We are out at 4:45, so we have 45 minutes. We should get through this. Lovely. Okay. I can put the PowerPoints on Canvas, sure. That's going to be easier than you having to watch YouTube to get them all. So yeah, I'll post the PowerPoints to Canvas after. Since I use LibreOffice, sometimes these don't open very well in Word or whatever the Word equivalent to PowerPoint is. Well, it's PowerPoint, actually. I don't know why I said that. So yeah, sometimes they don't open as well in PowerPoint. I'll try to save all the slideshows in both formats. Just open it in the format for whatever you're using. And everything opens like crap in Sheets. So don't open it in Sheets. Okay, so email. Most of you probably know roughly how old email is. Email was really invented in the late 60s just as a technology and early 70s. But computers were so expensive at that point that it really didn't catch on until the 80s, when it was a little bit more common for people to at least have a computer in the office. So the email technology doesn't necessarily drive the culture and the way that emails are written. The way emails are written comes in from the office culture that it replaces in the 80s. And before email came around, there were a ton of different ways to communicate with people asynchronously. So email is this form of communication where you send out a message and then the other person gets to read it at their leisure. And that replaces basically voicemail, which is you call somebody and they aren't there, so you have to leave them a message. Essentially, nobody does that anymore. There are still occasionally people who leave voicemails, but especially among younger people today, the amount of people who check their voicemail box is basically zero. And even among older people, most people just don't bother anymore, just because the rise of the phone spammer has completely destroyed voicemail. Every time you check your voicemail, it's hello, your automobile insurance has expired, or whatever it is, and it sort of completely killed it off. The spam element of voicemail killed it off. Email also replaces the memo and the fax to an extent. So if you wanted to send a message around the office that was like email related, so you wanted everybody in the office to read something, you would write a physical memo. Copies of it would be printed and they would be given to everybody. That was tremendously inconvenient. You can see that email obviously killed a few jobs because at some point there was a person whose job it was to print memos and distribute them around the office. That person is now rather obsolete. Someone mentioned that there's a really cool Lego video and they're up next. And, you know, your recommendations are based on what you watch, so I'm not sure why you watch Lego videos. Let's resume. Fax was a good way to get in touch with an individual person. If you wanted to send somebody the equivalent of an email today, something written that you wanted them to look at, you could send them a fax. Of course, not too many people have a fax machine anymore, except banks, apparently. Banks are still running on fax somehow. And then, of course, you could always write somebody a letter. Right. Now, the interesting thing about all of these different formats is they have really different levels of formality. So in a voicemail, you want it to be as brief as possible because a rambly voicemail was very annoying. You needed people to get to the point. And also because if there was a rambly voicemail, it would fill your voicemail box. And usually there was a time constraint on how long you could leave a voicemail for, period. So you really had to get to the point there. Memos, generally one page, because otherwise people would just throw them in the trash without reading them. Faxes, you could sometimes have to pay money to send more than one page, or you had to pay per page. So there was some motivation there to be a little bit less formal or to keep it short. And obviously letter writing is super formal because you're, well, formally writing a letter. It's almost the definition, generally speaking. So there's formal and informal different communications there. They all get replaced by email. But today, as most of you know, people don't email that much. There's usually texting or messaging apps. Usually within your organization, there's some kind of messaging app. It might be like Discord. It's usually Slack in the tech industry. It could be some kind of like Hangouts style thing. But those are the messaging apps of the future. Still, email today is the de facto standard in communication. And even as those messaging apps replace email for some functions, email is probably going to stick around for a long time as a permanent record, as the long-form, lazy style of communication that it is, where you can read the messages at your own leisure. So we're looking at a culture that evolved mostly under Gen X and millennials entering the workforce in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Those are people who were already equipped with technology when they were entering the workforce. At least in the United States, everything was pretty modernized, so most of those people had computers earlier than some other parts of the world. And the culture that evolved in the US is typically a fast and less formal culture of email. Most people would not expect your email to be perfectly grammatically correct. It's quite forgivable to make mistakes in email. It's not something that you have to sit there and proof over and over again until it's perfect. You have to do reasonably well. You have to look like you were trained in writing at some point and that you finished primary school. But if you spell one word wrong, nobody's going to give you crap for it. Another thing that's very US specific, or not necessarily US specific, but unique to some places, the US included, is that most people don't small talk in email, especially after the introduction. So sometimes there's some small talk in the first couple emails in a thread, and then after that it's pretty much gone. In other places like Africa, small talk is really important. You have to open with small talk. It's actually kind of disrespectful not to. So it depends where you are. Some cultures will prefer to always open up with "how's the kids," something like that. But in the US, if we're going to do that kind of thing, it's going to be one little tidbit at the beginning probably, and that's it. Emails are generally supposed to be informative, so you're not just sending emails to shoot the shit. You're actually trying to talk about something. It's supposed to be information passing. And email is considered to be a shorter form of communication. It's supposed to describe the whole problem. Most people get a little bit irritated if they get an email that's like the equivalent of 20 pages. All right, so if there's a serious technical issue, email is the first top-level summary of it. It is not the complete analysis. So it's a short but not complete form of information passing. And again, outside the US, all of this can vary. Some cultures, especially in Asia, will write a lot. They'll be very informative. They have very long emails. And a short email, you almost never get a short email. You'll get a huge, long thing with a full description of the problem and then a bunch of formalities as well. And the formality is another thing that varies widely. So in a lot of places, email is much more formal and the grammatical expectation is higher. So if you're talking to people in other countries, kind of be aware of their expectations too. So what is email for? Email is for informative messages, reminders, okay, low to mid-urgency requests, not for high-urgency requests. If it needs to be done in hours or minutes, then you should do something else. You should call them. You should send them a message on your chat application. Leave them a voicemail. If you need somebody's attention quickly, it's probably not a job for email. If email's all you've got, though, then I guess you should have just planned ahead. So at that point, you're in the situation you're in. Email is also still widely used for meeting planning. Most organizations have something that they use for meeting planning internally, but a lot of the time you're going to be meeting with people who are not from your organization. In that case, you need some way to set up meetings. Email is usually the way to do it. There's nothing more inconvenient than trying to set up a meeting between 3 or 4 people on the phone. That might be the biggest nightmare that there is in communication, especially if all 3 or 4 people are busy. Email is a great way for you to exchange schedules and get a common date set. People still use email to exchange documents. That's rapidly becoming untrue. People use docs or something and then email just the links, but people still use email to exchange documents for the most part. And then email is good for simple discussions. So a few back and forths, a few points to address. It's good to have a record, but if it's something long, you should probably take it somewhere else. You should have a meeting. If it's a complex or nuanced discussion, if there's a lot of technical stuff in it, you should probably take it to a meeting. So if email is not for nuanced discussions, those should go to meetings. High urgency requests, those should be phone calls or texts. And if you need to collaborate on a document with lots of edits, if you need to go back and forth, if there's a lot of important information to be exchanged, that's also not going to be email. Okay, for the subject line, I'm not talking about the subjects of your email. I'm talking about the subject line here. If you are a true barbarian who is so detached from civilization that you want to make everyone's life miserable, then leave the subject line blank. But if I get an email that it has no subject as the subject, I just get filled with an unnatural rage. So if you just want to irritate me, just send me an email with the subject line blank. Okay, but what should a good subject be? Well, it definitely needs to be brief, right? Because you don't know how big the person's screen is. And for all you know, they're only going to get like the first 5 words of that subject. Not everybody has a 32-inch monitor, and they might be looking at it on their phone or something. So on my phone, I probably get like the first maybe 10 words of your subject. That's something like 50 characters. And then after that, it's dot, dot, dot. And I'm not going to scroll over to see what the rest of it is. So you definitely have to be brief. You have to be informative. You have to let them know what it's going to be about. And you have to summarize the point. So whatever is going to be in the body of the email, you need to summarize it. This is very important because most people sort their inbox in some way, or when they're looking for that email down the road, it's very helpful if what that email is talking about is in the subject. So if there's some kind of report, make sure the name of that report is in the subject. If you're talking about some application, make sure the name of that application is in the subject. If you're talking about a job interview or something, make sure interview is in the subject. That way they can go back and look for report, application, interview, those kinds of keywords. That means that if you have 2 subjects, so if you're talking about 2 things, just send 2 emails. There's nothing wrong with sending 2 emails. You don't get an award for packing in as much information as humanly possible. Avoid useless words like information about or discussion of, any of these kinds of things where you're just precluding the subject. So just start with the subject right away. If it's information about an application, just say application and then what you're talking about in it. And obviously avoid using the recipient's own name. The person you're talking to is not a Pokemon. You don't have to address them as Dear Pikachu and then what you're going to write the email about. Just say what you're going to write the email about. You don't have to include their name in it. They know their own name, hopefully. Headers are part of the subject line. Office workers, your average office worker, is easily going to get and send combined, not each, 100 emails plus a day. Not everybody, probably not most people in computer science. If you're in computer science management, so if you're some kind of manager in development, you could easily get 100 emails a day. It's not unusual. And headers let people know how severe your message is so it can be triaged accordingly. So some people are literally spending most of their day at their computer answering emails, because if you've got 100 a day and you work 8 hours, that gives you what, like 2 minutes an email? I don't know, I'm not a mathematician, but not a lot of time. Headers let people know how severe your problem is, how quickly it needs to be addressed. So there are no standard words that everybody uses, but there are some that are pretty common. I think urgent is pretty universal. A lot of email clients even have urgent built in. It's nice if the person actually has to send you something back to include response needed. It seems a little bit condescending, but it can actually be helpful for people who get a lot of emails that are generally informative, and that's usually the situation most office workers are in. Of those 100 emails a day, 90 of them are just telling them something and not expecting them to reply back. So it's actually a little bit helpful sometimes if you do need a reply to include response needed or action needed or something like that, to tell the person that, hey, you need to actually read this and figure out the part where I need something from you and then do it. And then that's what they're going to do. It makes it more convenient for them. Some people see that as condescending, but I think for the most part, people are pretty accepting. If you want to make a meeting request is a good thing to include. If your email is just informative and it's something like office Christmas party or whatever, it's nice to include optional so that people who are busy can ignore it until they are less busy. There's no standard wording, but those are some of the common ones. Consider surrounding your header in square brackets so that people know it's a header. Okay. I don't like using words like important or please read. Some people use these instead of urgent, but important is like, okay, if it wasn't important, why would you have sent it to me, right? So let's see, I've got a question. Some examples of emails like normal, urgent, and a bad email. Yeah, I'll just pull up my JCU inbox faculty updates and I'll find you a bunch of bad examples. I'm going to have to dig a little to find some good ones. But no, that is actually speaking to the point I was just on about important or please read. There are a lot of offenders in those mailing lists on those things. They will have something like I don't know, an update about rules or something, and they'll have an important or a please read in there. Those are irritating, especially when it's actually not that important. So it's like important office Christmas party. Then wow, I'm very irritated when I get one of those. But I will give you some examples. Yeah, I'll try to find some real examples too of all the, well, not all the headers, but a few different headers and good places for them to be used. Some email clients have built-in headers, but it's not built into the email standard protocol. So a lot of inboxes ignore them. People's email clients ignore them. Users might ignore them. Either the user ignores it or their mailbox ignores it. Either way, it's the same end effect. And other email clients, like internal email clients at an organization, so let's say all of you use the same one, sometimes then you'll have standard headers and those might actually be used. So if you have something like that at your organization, you should use those. If you overuse headers, you will get on people's mental ignore list. They'll just look at who it's from and they'll see the header and they'll just disregard it. So if it's not that important, don't use a header. That's the best way to not irritate people and not get ignored. Most emails, most messages will not have a header. All right, moving on from the subject line, so the intro to the body of the email. This is a place where a lot of people are confused. I see some really weird stuff in intros sometimes. I see people be like, to whom it may concern, it is formally addressed that by the grace of His Imperial Majesty, or something like that. In America, it's typically cool to just start with the person's name, right? You don't necessarily have to be super formal. The person's name is a sufficient salutation. So if you're writing an email to me, I have a title, so I suppose you can include it. You can say Dr. Gurari, or you can just say Gurari for short. If you're writing an email to somebody with whom you are on a first name basis, which is most relationships in the United States, most people would even consider themselves to be on a first name basis with their boss. It would be very unusual for you to call your boss Mr. Steve instead of Steve. So if you're on a first name basis with somebody, use their first name. Just say, hey, Steve. Don't say hey, just say Steve. This is not true in all cultures. So in organizational cultures, like the university, the title is important. Most people get a little bit irritated if you don't include their doctor. They worked so hard for it, right? And then in other organizations, companies, sometimes there's more of an air of formality, and people prefer to use last names and Mr. or Mrs. in the intro. But that's not everywhere. It's probably the minority. Now, abroad, people do like to have their titles used. So in Germany, for example, it's pretty common to use Frau or Herr. Herr is the male, Frau is the female when you're communicating with people there. So make sure that if you're talking to Germans, you use their formal title. And in some Asian cultures as well, you would use something like San or whatever the equivalent is in that country when you address them. And of course, in organizations that have a hierarchy, you pretty much must address people by their rank. So those are pretty much just the military. But if you're in the military, you'd emailing somebody, you would probably say their rank as well as their name. So lieutenant or chief. And you might even omit their name. You might address them only by their rank. All right. In a organization, a hierarchy, so if you're talking to, say, the CEO, might not be a bad idea to be more formal, but I think in those instances, still, in a lot of cases, you would address them just by first name. So just start with their first name and a comma, unless you see some cultural reason why you should do otherwise. If you want, you can include the word hello in their name, or some other semi-formal greeting like salutations. Those are kind of weird because no one really says salutations anymore. It's a little bit odd when people use like dear at work. It's a bit of a strange opening, but yeah, you can use dear if you want. So dear and then their name. You could just omit those as well, though. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't help. It's fine either way. For some conversations, let's say you have multiple recipients. Let's say you're sending an email to Bob, Steve, and Jack. You can address them all by name. So you can say Bob, Steve, Jack, and then a comma in the message that's going for all of them. But if each of them is getting their own message as well, sometimes you can send one email to all three of them. So there's the Bob, Steve, Jack part at the top, and then there's the next section, and then you just say Bob, and then the things that Bob needs to do, Steve, and then the things Steve needs to do, and then Jack, and then the things Jack needs to do. If you have more than, I would say, 3 recipients, so many being more than 3, then you should probably not address people by their individual names. That gets too long. At that point, you should just use something like hello all, hello folks, hello colleagues, dear folks, something like that. I'll definitely show you some examples of that in use. That is very common among all of the different broadcasts that we get at the institution. It's always something like colleagues or folks or staff or what have you. So more than 3 people, just use some kind of plural like that. All right, so you've made your introduction. Now get to the point. Okay, get to the point immediately. Even in cultures that are super formal, still lead with the point and then do the formal stuff. Because if you don't get to the point right away, it'll probably be lost. Most people, if we're being honest, only read the first 1 to 3 lines completely. Then they skim, and then they might not even skim, or they might skim so quickly that everything else gets lost. So if you have something important to say, if you have anything to say it early, and make sure that it's clear right out the door. All right, attachments. If you wrote the word attached in your email, luckily there's been a revolutionary feature. I don't know who first came up with it, but it truly revolutionized email, that if it sees the word attached in most modern inboxes, it'll warn you before you send the email. It looks like you said attach, but you didn't attach anything, right? Man. Before that, it was terrible. You would forget attachments all the time. Everybody would send you an email like, here's the document we were working on, and then 2 minutes later, whoops, forgot to attach it. Thank God those days are now behind us for the most part. But if you reference something in your email, and it's possible for you to attach it so you have it, then do so. Attach it. Don't make people hunt for old attachments in your inbox. So if you're working on a document, and then you send them a different email about the document, and you say, just refer back to my previous email for the attachment. Really irritating, because now they have to go find it. And again, they might get 100 emails a day. Okay, so even if you named your subjects well, even if they can just look for the name of that file and they can find it, it's still annoying. If it's possible, just attach it again. But if you want to continue that conversation and you don't want to send another email, then just reply to that same thread, and then they'll have the attachment in there in that same thread. Avoid sending multiple versions of the same file, or confusion will ensue. So if you have a document that is actively being worked on, like it's being modified, and you're back and forth on it, then consider just sending them a link instead. That way you can just modify what's at the end of the link instead. If you are going to send multiple versions of the same file, make sure that your file gets renamed every time, and make sure that it's renamed in a way that's clear that it's updating. So something like the date or the time or a version number. If you send multiple versions of the same file, inevitably what's going to happen is that somebody's going to look for it in their email, find one of those versions and assume that's good, and then they're going to use that one for something, and it's going to cause problems because they're not using the latest version. So make sure that either you're replying on the same thread, that way the one at the bottom is going to be the most recent. That's the best way to do version control over email, or at the very least that you're changing the file name so that it's clear that there are newer ones. Sometimes you don't have to send the whole file. Sometimes a screenshot is enough. If it's like a 45-page book of laws of the company and you just want to point out one law, just send a screenshot of the law that you're talking about. You don't have to send the whole book of the company and say, please reference page 47, line 32, paragraph B. That's pretty annoying as well. And then because this is an era of increased cybersecurity concern, there have been some recent malware attacks that spread primarily through PDF attachments. PDF macros are very dangerous. A lot of people have their PDF macros on because convenience. So even things like PDF are risky is the point I'm trying to get at. So let alone things like doc and docx and all those different things. So if it's possible, convert your thing into plain text before you send it. If that's not possible, PDF is fine. If people don't have their macros disabled, I guess to an extent that's their problem. But the best thing to do is to send plain text whenever it's possible. Plain images are usually fine as well, so something like PNG is also fine. Send a zip if you have too many files to send. Again, a zip is a bit of a security concern, but it's also a huge convenience if you have 45 text files to send. At that point, the convenience probably dwarfs the cybersecurity issue, especially between people who probably trust each other. And then, of course, email attachments have file size limits, so zip compression helps you to keep that down. And then people's inboxes used to have capacity limits. That's pretty much not a problem anymore unless you're a huge consumer of email, but they can keep some space in their inbox free as well. But still, be wary of what you send, and especially of what you open. Even if you don't know that your computer is infected with malware, you could accidentally send some to somebody, and that could lead to some problems with you and them in the future. But definitely be careful of what you open, and definitely don't turn on macros for anything that you get from the outside internet. Name your attachments appropriately. It's always very annoying when I get an attachment, and it's like something scan, and then you can tell that they scanned it multiple times and there's duplicates because it's got that number in the parentheses at the end or something like that. Just name the document what it is, title it, and whatever it's supposed to be. So you're done with your email, you've finished. Now let's talk about the sign-off. Don't make the sign-off part of your signature because a lot of the time you'll omit it. A lot of people want to make a standard signature and they'll put like the word thanks in it, so they'll have their signature and that'll include thanks. And then you get into weird situations like someone's, I don't know, family member died and you send them an email, my condolences. Thanks, Dr. Gurari. Not great. So send the signature depending on what you actually want to say at the end there. Don't, the sign off, not the signature. Send the sign off depending on what you actually want to say. So if you're concluding a request or a communication, say thank you or thanks. If you are writing a more formal message, like just informative, or maybe you're making a more formal request, something like regards or yours are pretty good. Those are common things. And if you are apologizing to somebody or giving somebody your condolences, my apologies, my condolences, I apologize, something like that is a good way to end it. Some people think that thanks is informal. That's definitely a cultural change, the integration of thanks instead of thank you. I think thanks is far more common than thank you today. I think it's grown to the point where it's formally accepted, but if it's a very formal message, then probably still go with thank you. But thanks is fine for the most part. And again, if you don't need it, just omit it. No one really cares if you say thanks or thank you or all that stuff at the end. I guess it matters to some people, but I think to the vast majority, nobody really cares. So what should your signature look like? It depends. It depends on your organization. In a lot of organizations, they will just tell you what your signature is supposed to look like. That's the best case, honestly. I wish that John Kirill just told me exactly what my signature was supposed to look like, because now I have to guess. And my preference is the minimalist. So if you've ever emailed me, you'll see that mine is super minimal. I used to just have my name and then the organization's name. Now I've added my title as well, but name and organization name at a bare minimum so people know who you are and where you're messaging from, because if I'm sending an email from my John Carroll email address, then I'm sending email in my capacity as an employee of that organization. And the reason I had my title omitted before is because at a university, you basically know what everybody's default job is. We're basically professor. So if you're at a place where everybody has a default job, like if you're at a sales company, if your email address is bob@salescompany.org, you're probably a salesman. You might be able to leave off the word salesman. Like if you're at a car dealership, for example, and you're bob@bobscrazycars, Yeah, you're probably a car salesman, so you probably don't need to include that. But if your role is ambiguous, which is how it is at most companies, then you should also include your role. So software developer, senior software developer, junior software developer, those aren't really as important. You could just say software developer. You don't necessarily have to say senior or junior. But obviously, once you've gotten to the point of senior, you're going to want to say it. So most people, when they get a rank that they're proud of, they'll start including it. And until then, just include whatever is the most fitting there. Definitely, if you are some sort of management or you have some sort of specialist role, like you're an orderer or a purchaser or something like that, you would want to include those things. Most people, if they have them, will include their letters. So, Doctor, DDS, MD, JD, whatever you are, you would probably include that. Lets people know that you're qualified and that you have a particular profession, because if you went to school for one of those things, you're probably doing it. Now, if you went to dentist school and then became a software developer, it'd be pretty weird if messages came from Steve Stevenson, DDS, software developer, right? So at that point, you should probably exclude it. I don't think anybody's going to be in that position. You want to include your contact info in your signature most of the time, but I don't. And the reason that I don't is because if you include your phone number in your signature, then you are going to get inevitably some spam. And I get enough spam on my phone as it is. And that's not anybody's fault. It's not like people are signing you up for things, but people's inboxes get compromised and stuff happens. And I don't know, somehow your phone number always ends up getting leaked, and then you're going to end up getting spam. So if you do decide to include your phone, because it is, honestly, it's a minimal risk. You're not going to get much more spam than all of us get already. If you do end up giving out your phone, then specify what kind of phone it is. So work or mobile. If it's a work phone, then people know not to call you on that phone outside work hours unless they want to leave a voicemail. If it's a mobile, you're kind of inviting the outside work hours calls at mobile at that point. But still, you should specify what kind of phone it is so people are aware. And then specify your preferred phone. So in quotes as well, somewhere, or in parentheses somewhere, say if you have multiple phone numbers, which one you prefer to be called at. So I have an office phone on my syllabus because we're required to put that on our syllabi. I don't think anyone's ever called me on it. I think it rings. It's probably connected. I don't think I've seen it ring in, I don't know, well over a year. So that kind of phone, definitely not my preferred. If you have messaging apps at your company, like Slack or Hangouts or something, you might want to include some part of your contact information there, so what channel you're in or something like that, or if you're in like IT, whatever ticketing you use, something like that. Another thing is if you're including a phone number, include whether or not they can call or text. So just kind of say call only or text only. This goes back to the days when people would put phone and fax. Massimo in chat says that he actually attempted to call me once. Well, did I answer? And probably not is the answer, because it would have to be a very specific situation. I'd have to be in my office at that exact time, which does not happen that often. If you have one at your organization, it's becoming increasingly rare for people to get their own office, but if you're lucky enough to get one, say where it is, at least what building it's in. If you are available during particular times of day for meetings, especially if it's standardized, like if your organization requires everybody to have like a common hour or something, then you should include that. And especially if you're a remote worker, you can indicate your availability right in the email somewhere there. That way, it's much easier to coordinate meetings if somebody decides that they want one to follow up with one of your emails. But again, large companies will often have a set signature format. You're not going to have to think of any of this stuff. So just kind of think about what you do, what you're comfortable including. Okay, read receipts are fairly uncommon now, but I thought I should mention them. They technically allow you to see if your message was read. Text messaging has gotten much better at actually processing these, whereas email is still terrible. It was once difficult to see if somebody had read your text message. Now a lot of the new apps, things like WhatsApp and that sort of thing, will actually tell you when the other person looks at it. That's helpful. Email, still kind of a crapshoot whether or not you get that information. it's up to the email client of the recipient whether or not they even want to process your read receipt. They might just throw it in the trash. The email will still go through, but the read receipt will just be completely stripped. And then generally, even if they get it, they're just going to ignore it because why bother? Sometimes I'll click an email and it'll pop up and say, do you want to send a read receipt? And I'll just hit cancel as fast as I can because I don't care and I want to get back to reading my email. And I think a lot of people will do the same. There are some professions, like the legal professions, where it's a little bit more important for people to know whether or not you've read what they've sent you. So in that case, they'll take it a little bit more seriously, and they'll send a read receipt out when they've actually finished reading it. I don't think that most computer science professions will do that or have that culture. Some companies, though, have an internal email client, and it'll deliver the read receipts automatically. In that case, by all means, use them. In that case, it's great. You can tell if people have read your emails, which can be quite helpful. One of the hardest parts about email culture is getting ghosted. In the last month, have gotten ghosted on something like every email I've sent to people at this institution. It happens. It's fine. Don't get offended by it. If you don't get a reply to your message in a day or two, remember, email is not urgent, so a day or two is not a terrible timeline, although realistically, a day is long enough to wait. So if you haven't gotten a response in a day or two, bump up your message by replying to yourself. That is, send them another email. Just hit that reply on your own sent email. It'll send them another email. And what should you put in there? What is a sufficient bump? Should you sort of try to give them a polite reason for possibly not getting it? Yeah, some people do that. Some people do like, hey, just making sure the spam filter didn't eat this. Gives people a nice out. I just usually go with a generic, hey, just making sure this reached you kind of thing. Just that one line. And then they could just read whatever it actually was. You don't need to like re-paste in your old email or something because it's on the same thread and they can just go back and see what you wrote originally. But yeah, don't write anything long. Just, hey, just making sure you got this. Just making sure this was not put in your spam box or something like that. And don't take it personally when people lose or forget your emails because, again, 100 plus emails a day. For some people, it happens all the time. It's not personal. It's just you got triaged to a lower priority level and ended up inevitably being ignored for a little bit. It happens. People are busy. Okay, but what do you do if they are still ignoring you after that, or if you've emailed them a few times and they just give you back one-word answers, or they're giving you the runaround? Okay, that happens often. And in this case, email is probably still the best way to contact them. So there are some situations where maybe it's time to move away from email. But let's say it's not. Let's say you decided to continue doing this on email. A nice passive-aggressive strategy is to CC their boss on the email. CC is, of course, when there are multiple recipients on an email. Comes from good old carbon copy on transparency paper. You would write something on one copy, and then there would be those little transparent-ish sheets of carbon copy underneath that would end up being duplicates, and you could give those duplicates to people. So CC. Anyway, if you CC somebody's boss on the thread, then now they know that their boss is watching the thread. Okay, so in that case, it becomes more important for them to respond to you and do their job. But if you overuse this, it's irritating to everybody involved. If you do it right out the gate, first of all, it indicates that you probably have a lack of trust in the person that you're sending the message to. And then, of course, bosses are probably busier than their subordinates. That's not always true. People like Mr. Steve exist. But generally speaking, bosses are busier than the subordinates, and they don't have time to be CC'd onto every conversation. And that quickly escalates their inbox to hundreds and hundreds of emails a day. So don't CC them on everything. Of course, if it's information that you think that their boss needs, then by all means include them. It's not passive-aggressive to include them if you think that it's something that they need. If it's something that you're fleshing out and then their boss needs to know at the end, then consider just going back and forth until you've gotten a resolution and then CCing them at the end of the conversation. Remember that email is an official record. Corporations will generally save all of their emails, so don't say anything that would get you fired or get you or the company sued. Don't say anything that you don't want read in a courtroom somewhere. If there's a problem, like the company gets audited, or somebody sues, or you get fired and you don't like it, or anything like that, your emails are all going to go to court, and that's not going to be fun. So just like paper messaging, email is really only semi-private. They'll dig up those papers if they need them. They'll put them in storage somewhere, and they'll come back. So when you're emailing, be very explicit in your wording. Don't leave anything ambiguous. I don't know, if you're a sports fan and you write, we're going to kill those Cowboys on Saturday, make sure you capitalize Cowboys. Otherwise, that could be a problem. Something like that. Avoid slang. Avoid things that could easily be misinterpreted. Any kind of statement that would end up, again, being read on the stand as you made a mistake. Can you imagine? You're on the stand and they go, see here that you wrote, we're going to kill those guys. What did you mean? Okay. Now you have to defend yourself. Never use your work email for personal things, and vice versa. Don't use your personal email for work. Because when you leave the company, that's the primary reason, above all the others, okay? When you leave the company, you will lose your work email. So if you signed up for Netflix with your work email, your Netflix goes bye-bye. Either that or you have to change the email on your Netflix, which usually requires you to have access to the first email in the first place. It's a huge headache to change your subscription to anything when you don't have access to the email that it's on. Okay, and this goes doubly for things that are more important, like, I don't know, your accountant or something. If those emails are in your work email and you leave the company, boy, you're in bad shape. And you could leave the company at any time. Stuff happens. You could be terminated. You could be let go. Don't expect that you're going to be somewhere forever and then just start using your work email as personal. The other problem, to a lesser extent, the company does get access to your personal life. They now see that you have a Netflix account or whatever. If that's something you don't have a problem with, okay, but especially for more private stuff, you definitely don't want the company having access to it. And another good reason is that company emails tend to go out occasionally, and if there's a problem with the company email, then it becomes your problem, whereas Gmail and platforms like that tend to actually be extremely reliable. They don't go out very often at all. Now, if you have non-work messages, like you're inviting all of your work colleagues to your birthday party, it's still typically accepted to send those on the work email. So messages to your coworkers, even if they're not necessarily work-related, are, fair game, I would say. Okay, BCC. So like carbon copy, but with a B. In traditional carbon copy, everybody sees who else is on the email, so the complete list of recipients is included in the header. BCC sees only themselves and CC'd people, so you don't see all of the other BCC'd people. And when a BCC'd person hits reply all, it only goes to the sender and the other people who are CC'd. So BCC to 10 people is like sending the same email to 10 people individually. So BCCs are used for large-scale memos or announcements, or in the super passive-aggressive move when you want to CC their boss but not make them aware that their boss is aware. This is kind of meta tactics that's a little too Machiavellian for me to promote, but it's something that some people do occasionally. But generally the usage of BCC is you want to send something to a bunch of people, but you don't want the people to have access to that large mailing list. So if you're sending something to a lot of people in the company and there's no particular reason why everybody should be able to talk to each other, then use BCC. And that is it with 2 minutes to spare. So do I have any questions on email? If not, we're going to have a few sample emails posted to Canvas, and then we're going to have the first email-based homework assignment, which I'm just going to describe briefly. You are going to have to set a meeting with somebody in this class. All right, so I'm going to just randomly give you somebody that you have to set a meeting with. You will actually have to set a meeting with them by email, and then you will have to follow up and actually have that meeting, 5 minutes long or so. Okay, so start thinking about how you would ask one of your, well, a randomly chosen one of your colleagues here to have a meeting with you. And that's what we're going to do here for homework. I should have that posted probably later today after the senior design class. And I guess enjoy your 15-minute break, because I will see you all in 15 minutes. And I'm going to hang out on Discord in the meantime if you want to say hi. So that's it for today. See ya.